You are listening to Designing the 21st Century.
I remember sometimes birds would fly in through the windows and perch on my grandmother's chandelier, and they would look down and scout the table for food. And so I wanted to create a lamp that could capture that childhood memory. I wanted to mesh the crystals with the colorful feathers, to mesh traditional cold reality with the unexpected, crazy interventions of life. Initially, we set out to use actual taxidermy birds, but unfortunately, they were very difficult to properly assemble.
Sebastian Errazuriz is an artist and an activist who celebrates design's presence in every aspect of our life. He works with many disciplines. He's a craftsman, thinker, and creator who makes beautiful objects and fun things, but also making provocative statements. His work is bold, ambitious, and experimental, touching on his own personal experience while connecting to the spirit of the age. It is always surprising, unexpected, and exciting. And if you know how to read it, you will discover layers and layers of meanings. They include themes of morality, religion, political and social statements, and the discovery of design as an agent of change. To Sebastian, design is a means of communication, questioning, and as a way to engage with the world. He's a brilliant storyteller, and today I'm having him as my guest to speak about those stories and about how he conveys them in social media. While the world of design is currently struggling with the changing modes of Instagram, wandering between reels and posts, and navigating between artificial intelligence and the authentic, while questioning what makes Instagram influencer successful. It seems that he found the right formula. Hi, Sebastian.
Thank you for having me.
How are you
Very
these days?
good.
Where do you live these days?
I'm between Santiago, Chile, Paris, and New York.
Wow.
So moving back and forth between all three.
And you were born in Chile?
Yes, I'm originally Chilean, raised in London, and then New York the past 20 years mostly.
And I know your parents, there is a really interesting story. Your parents are artists, right?
Yes, my father did his PhD in how to educate art. So every kid in Chile, from kindergarten to 18, learns the program he designed, a program he trained on me as a guinea pig first. So I basically was born in the circus and trained.
That's amazing. And what's new? I haven't seen you for a while. What's new?
I've been working 16-hour days like crazy. We have this book that is coming out of 20 years of work. And then in parallel, I have a small written book of the impact artificial intelligence will have on society. It's called A Problem of Imagination. And the main thesis is that the majority of experts that are building AI are not necessarily considering how it's going to impact us due to a lack of imagination.
I want to start talking to you about your Instagram, and I tell you why. Because today we are in a place where putting just a beautiful picture is not enough.
Sure.
It was enough when we started with Instagram, when you started and I started. But today it's not enough, and people are really struggling. What do you do? How do you do it? I also think that posting just a traditional video is not enough as well.
Sure.
What you do is really brilliant, and I want to ask you first, when did you start shifting?
I started shifting, so it's interesting. About 5 years ago, before COVID, I realized that the logic and the numbers behind a traditional gallery exhibition as a marketplace in which we could show our work didn't make that much sense. It was an amazing opportunity, but because in general every artist only shows once a year or twice a year with a gallery, we needed to find other ways to show the work, and that had to be visual. So on one end, we quickly started figuring out how to make the most perfect renderings of projects so that we could create a perfect project before having it prototyped. And then later it was, how do I narrate these same stories that I would have in a studio visit? and have them packaged in a way that someone with ADHD who's flipping through their phone can actually stop for a few seconds and have a little bit of that studio visit feeling.
And so tell me, how do you create those videos?
Sure. So I travel with me in my backpack. I now always have a little tripod, and I have a folder with sheets of drawings, A4 papers. There's probably 100 in them. And I have a little masking tape. And so if I'm in a hotel and I know I need to do 2 scripts for these videos, I put them up on the wall so that they can replicate my traditional wall at the studio. And then I just sit in front and try to narrate the story behind one of these projects. And so in a weird way, I'm almost carrying a mobile set with me now, so that it doesn't matter where I am, I can always set up a wall and create the little script and record myself narrating a 1-minute story.
So it's just a one-person operation.
That's the recording of the video, and then my team grabs that. They have footage and photographs and making of behind every piece. And we have a sort of a general structure in which we know the first few seconds I say something, then we show an image of the project, then it goes back to me, then there's a post-it on the wall, then there's the sketches, then there's a blueprint, and so on. So there's almost like a little general structure as you would have for maybe making a song, where you enter the song and then there's the chorus and then you go back to the main kicker and so on.
But you're telling me now about the formula, and yes, you do have that, but you also have something else in your videos on Instagram, that they are very much reflecting who you are. And I feel that today on Instagram, let's say if you give it to somebody else to do it for you,
sure,
or if you do it too professional, it really doesn't go.
Sure. Well, that has not changed at all. So I continue to be the exact same person. And that has an advantage in the era of social media, because people can like me or not like me, but they know I'm for real. They know I'm honest and I'm not bullshitting. And that's an advantage, because it allows your own audience to decide, I actually like this guy. I don't even like him, but I like his work, and he always says something interesting enough that I want to continue seeing him. And so I think that's key. And then the other element is there's a lot of artists and designers that focus on aesthetics or a style. A lot of them that focus on craftsmanship. Every single one of my projects is first and foremost an idea and a story. And so it actually matches very well a social media narrative, because we've always liked stories. Every single one of my projects is a different story. It was always that way. And so in a way, I am fortunate that this medium actually rewards the storytelling and is eager for new, different stories each time.
So
I'm
it's
lucky
really
to have 500 stories already made, each one completely different.
It's really interesting, because narrative was always a very crucial part of your work.
Yes.
And now you have this platform where your work fits perfectly into it. And also it's authentic. Mm-hmm. So I feel that if it's not authentic, it's a problem. And I don't feel that it can really pass in Instagram. But there is something else. Talking about authenticity, let's talk about artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, it really made such beautiful, like almost magical images, magical gardens and interiors. And then slowly, people don't want to see it anymore. Mm-hmm. People want the authentic.
Yeah.
What is it in artificial intelligence that made our imagination, that sort of almost tarnishes our imagination?
It's a good question. I think there's lots of elements here. So first, I have never changed the way I work, and it's always been based on approaching a problem of creative output from first principles. So for me, I have a series of rules for all of my work. So my work always has to be a new original idea. The work always needs to feel atemporal, timeless. So you don't know if this was made in 1930 or 2030. Ideally, it's noble materials or materials that have belonged and existed throughout time.
Like which?
Wood, steel, bronze, marble, glass, all the classics. So again, it feels timeless. And then ideally you see a work and you don't know if this was made by a Japanese designer, a Brazilian designer, a Danish designer, or maybe a Brazilian artist, or maybe a Norwegian artist. And for me, those are necessary requirements so the piece stands the test of time and can have a dialogue with other works. That's the first. The second is, I always wanted the idea to almost be like a bit that a comedian would narrate up on stage. Something very, very simple, but in which they managed to capture an idea that we all recognize and know, and that it would trigger something in our heads. And for me, the test of that was there's some parts in the south of Chile where there's no internet, there's no radio signal, there's no telephone signal. And I always thought, I need my work to be in such a way that two fishermen can be in a boat and one can narrate to the other one what they saw. And the other one has to be able to imagine it in their head. And so for me, that imagining in the head based on a phrase is almost like the prompt we give an AI today. Because when the execution of an idea becomes a commodity, accessible to all, it's the idea, it's the prompt, it's the bit that is what's valuable. And so naturally, when AI first came around, we were all enamored of its aesthetic beauty. It's an aesthetic exuberance. But what's really valuable, what really will stand the test of time, is the idea, the original idea, the story behind.
So are you not using contemporary materials and synthetic materials?
I use them in the process of fabrication. So we will use resin and other elements. But generally it's to make the molds and to create prototypes and pieces. And then what we do use, which is partially cheating, is we have a what's called poured marble, which is a mix between marble dust and a resin that allows me to create certain pieces that have the feel and elegance and weight of marble, but not the physical weight, so that it's easier to move and transport and place.
And these are the pieces you do for David Gill,
Yes.
and I just love them. They are just so beautiful and so timeless and elegant. Okay, so now you have 20 years summarized in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you, how do you define yourself in the movement of contemporary design? How, if I'm thinking about Sebastian Errazuriz, who is he in this entire movement? What is his contribution? What is his identity?
That's a very good and very hard question. The vast majority of artists and designers throughout the 20th century have differentiated themselves generally through their style. It's almost a branding exercise that would be similar to what we would expect from a luxury brand like Louis Vuitton that stamps a monogram with a recognizable logo. So if you think of the vast majority of artists or designers, they have a recognizable aesthetic. For me, that was always too easy. And for me, that meant that it was the short run to get to being recognized. What I try to do instead is to have a recognizable method. Every one of my works has a twist and is original and different. And they all comply with these series of timeless rules that feel universal. And I hope my contribution, even though it will take longer, will be appreciated over time as the guy who reimagined and reinvented everything he could find. Because I'm not decorating and I'm not creating within my own aesthetic style. I'm always grabbing something that people already know and I'm presenting it again to them, inviting them to look again, to see again. Because I feel that if I do that throughout my entire life, the fact that a young designer can now see a book maybe 5 times that size and say, wow, this guy, everything he grabbed, he imagined it again, and basically saying, you don't need to accept society the way they're telling you it is. You don't need to do things the way everyone has done them. You can reimagine things again. You can think from first principles. I hope that's my contribution. And it's a harder, longer one to do, but I hope that's what I hand out, that I'll have given like a little Larousse illustrated of everything you can imagine, reimagined, not redesigned, but reimagined.
And you are completely dedicated to that. And on this note, I want to thank you, Sebastian, for coming here, for speaking, and for being who you are.
Thank you so much, Daniela, and thank you for giving voice and dialogue to designers and artists. I think we need an interpreter that can help communicate each artist's search and help the audience and this new growing collector base to understand who fits and matches their own personal interests and who they can support and help.
Hundreds of statues were toppled throughout the United States, and the municipalities in charge were left with the dilemma: do we destroy these? Do we store them? Do we sell them? It occurred to me that maybe we could just leave the statues there on the floor as they had fallen and simply place on top a wooden plank, transform them into benches so they could now be used by the community. The fallen bench recycles the rightfully toppled statues and allows them to remain in the public realm so we can never forget their history. But at the same time, they might also remember with pride the day we chose to take those statues down.
This is Daniela Ohad. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Designing the 21st Century.